So the key to studying well is understanding the difference between skill and technique, and learning a technique that works well for you and continuously repeating the process so that you improve on the skill. Hey everyone, my name is Billy, and today I want to talk about study tactics. So in the last video, I talked about the common reasons why studying is perceived as a really negative experience, like parents' conditional love, or, like you're forced to go through the educational system. And now, knowing all of that, we want to still have fun while getting more knowledge into your head, right? That's it, that's study. Putting new knowledge into your head. And so there's a lot of techniques in order to help you do that, right? And when you search for study techniques, the first things that I see are the SQ3R method, the PQ4R method, and the Thieves method. So there's a lot of methods to apply to your studies. But before we get into that, I want to talk about the difference between skill and technique. I learned of this concept from a professor who teaches in Korea named John Frankel, and he also happens to be a professor in jiu-jitsu as well, which is a sport that I participate in. And so his DVD on jiu-jitsu, he specifies that technique and skill are different things, and you need both in order to perform well. Technique is a methodology you can apply, right? And it's based on concepts, and it's a framework for a set of actions. And so for studying, it's like the Pomodoro method, or the SQ3R method, or like your way of organizing the tasks or like things to study, the approach you take in a really specific way. That's the technique part, right? And a lot of people think that technique, when they know it, it should effortlessly just apply automatically. And so when I use this technique, everything better just like work, right? And then obviously it doesn't, because just knowing the technique isn't enough. And so they say, oh, this technique doesn't work, therefore I'm gonna abandon it, and this just doesn't work for me, right? So skill is what fills in that gap, right? You have to cultivate your skills in practicing that technique. So if you're doing the Pomodoro, the first few times you might be really distracted, right? But then you continuously apply yourself to getting used to that groove of the Pomodoro, and then you start seeing results because you've given yourself enough skill. You've given yourself enough tries to develop that skill of applying the technique of Pomodoro. And so SQ3R, everything, any other technique like that you use, just understand that knowing the technique is not enough by itself. You have to continuously apply the technique multiple times in order to be skilled at the technique. And that's why I think it's really important to find the technique that works for you, right? There's a lot of study techniques out there. And when you're forced to repeat something that you don't enjoy, you're really gonna be motivated to not repeat, obviously, right? So you have to be willing to find the technique that works really well for you so that you can repeatedly try that technique and have fun while doing it. And in order to do that, you need to be motivated to study as well, right? But we can cover that in another video. And today I just want to really focus on giving you some techniques that I think are really good for you, and the importance of skill when applying that technique. So my recommended approach to study is based on your preference and submodality. So you have 5 senses, right? But not all of them are your preferred senses. So some people, when they dress really well and they take really well organized notes, and they're all color coding their information, they may be really visually anchored. And a lot of people have really sensitive ears, right? Like musicians obviously have this ability, and a lot of people are good at imitating other people, impersonating. That's because they're sensitive to the sound that hits their ear and how they produce it, right? So those are auditory people. And you can repeat for all 5 senses, right? You can, some people smell really well, and taste is something that goes along with it. But I like to lump them together into a category called kinesthetic, right? So it's basically like activities. You're tactile, you like to feel things, you like to work out, you like to move your body as you engage in studying. And taste and olfactory, I like to group them in terms of like tactile. So it's like three senses into one, really broad category called kinesthetic. And the other part is I call digital. And digital is basically when you're not really like sensitive to your senses, but you're really cognitive and everything has to make sense in your brain, logical sense. Everything has to follow this like tree of logic. That's digital. And those are the four kind of submodalities that I choose to advocate for. So it's visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and digital. So you might have other definitions. Other people might have different definitions. That's completely fine. Do whatever works for you. In case I'm just giving this information to you in case you have no knowledge about any submodalities whatsoever. So how do you find your preferred submodalities? There's a bunch of tests you can take online, but what I just like to do is just take an honest look at your life. What are important things to you? When you go out shopping, do you go shopping for really like things that fit your aesthetics? Is organizing your wallpaper and your phone background, is that really important to you? Like, do you find yourself decorating a lot of things? Or is your house just sort of kind of like house or room kind of just bland and there's nothing much going on? That will give you a sense of whether you're a visual person or not. And like, are you always on your earbuds? Are you sensitive to loud noises? Or are you less sensitive, so some people call you but then you don't hear them? Or like, have people told you like, do you hear that noise? And you're like, what noise? I don't really know. So those are some cues to determining whether you're an auditory person or not. Kinesthetic, if you like working out, if you like exercising, you're probably a kinesthetic person. And if you use a lot of hand gestures like me, you might also be kinesthetic. If you just like kind of sitting down, not really doing anything, and also especially for food, a lot of people like me, I'm very kinesthetic, so I love eating food, right? I really act out like how much I enjoy this food. That's why I have food videos in my channel. But there are a handful of people who aren't like that, right? They just eat and it's just like, food is food, lunch is lunch. These are some aspects you can consider to see if you're like kinesthetic or not. And digital is, are you like an analytical person? Have people told you that you're like really, analytic and you're always very like calculating, whether in a good way or a bad way? You're just always thinking a lot in your head. That's a good ending. Or like, are you the type of person who just like feels like doing something and then you do whatever you feel like? And those are some good indicators to see if you're like a digital person or not. And now, when you know your preferred submodality, you can apply it to your studies as well, right? So if you know that you're a visual person, you can start applying visual techniques. You can start organizing your notes a certain way so that it's pleasing to your eye. And as you're writing your notes down and you're color coding the information, those can be really good cues for your brain to start absorbing the information that's in front of you. Another thing you can do is watch a lot of videos when you're learning the material instead of just reading books, because books are just like words, right? But if you watch a video that explains the concept you're interested in, that makes the knowledge more easily absorbed for your brain. And if you're an auditory person, then you can start listening to a lot of podcasts. You probably retain a lot of information that you hear from podcasts, right? And you can learn a lot from audiobooks, and you probably don't have to watch the videos on YouTube. You can just probably listen to it. And another good study tactic for you is to read out loud the things that you're trying to learn. So not only are you listening to your own voice, but you're verbalizing, which is an auditory kind of a feature. So that will make the information more readily retained in your brain. If you're a kinesthetic person, I encourage kind of playing around when you study, So instead of just trying to really sit down and be put, like toss a ball as you're reading. Or, juggle something as you're trying to retain something. Like if you're memorizing some words for a test, like a SATs, juggle some balls while you're going through your flashcards. Make it like an experience where you move the body so that you don't have to just try to confine yourself because that's what society says is the right way to study, right? There's no right way to study. Your brain the best. Make sure your study tactics are just optimized for your brain, nobody else's. If you're a digital person, I really, really like organizing the information that I'm learning into like a flow chart. So this works well obviously for like logic or electrical engineering, computer science kind of things, but it also works really well for histories and the humanities too, right? So if you're learning about World War II, you can create a diagram that's filled with branching paths in terms of like, okay, if this didn't happen in this country, then what would have happened? And this happened, so how did it progress? It's a really good way to kind of organize that information to a digital brain. And I want to say, like, you don't have to be one type, right? I'm primarily auditory and my visual is on the lower end, but I do affect a lot with kinesthetic and digital. So you might be the same way too. You might have more than one preferred submodality. In that case, how can you mix your preferred submodalities together to craft this really perfect study tactic for you? And then once you get that preferred study tactic, now, because it comes so naturally to you and because it's your preferred way of learning, you can continuously repeat that kind of study approach so that it becomes a great skill for you. I will have some more upcoming videos about study tactics and how you can apply them to your brain. So if you find these videos interesting, please consider subscribing, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.